Hi, Ben here, and welcome back to another Work in Progress Wednesday. As you can see, it is a bit of a disaster area, the workshop. We have got back from the Bushcraft show, and basically all we've managed to do so far is unload the van. So we've got to put all this back to rights, put the axe boards back up on the walls, get the buffy hat hooks back up, and basically generally sort out what is in all the drawers. But we just wanted to say a big thanks to everybody that attended the show and obviously came and said hello, and it was really lovely to see you all. And a few of you had purchased some of our new kitchen knives, and obviously we haven't got a video on how to sharpen one of these because these aren't a Scandi grind, they are a kitchen knife, so they've got a small secondary bevel. So we thought it'd be a fantastic time to actually show you how to maintain your kitchen knife. So here's one of our kitchen knives. So this is the latest edition, which has got a full flat grind and then this small, what you can see, a very polished secondary bevel. And this is approximately about sort of 12 to 13 degrees on each side. So this one's the really nice one with a stonewash finish and a older handle and black liners. But basically you can see where they've evolved from. So this was my sort of working prototype that I started off about maybe 9 months ago. So this only had the grind going about 2/3 of the way up the blade. Still same sort of flat grind and a small secondary bevel. But basically to improve cutting performance, we've taken that flat grind all the way up to the spine of the knife, making the edge geometry much thinner and better for sort of food release and things like that. But basically that's my working prototype, and obviously one of the new ones. Both have got a highly polished edge, but the same principle will happen basically when it comes to sharpening. So we need to maintain that edge. Obviously you could use a steel in your kitchen, but a steel tends to leave quite a coarse, ragged edge. So I'm going to show you how to actually put an edge on it by using Waterstone. So in this little trough that I used for my sharpening demos at the Bushcraft show, we've got a combination Waterstone. You can see that this one has been used for quite a few years now, so it is quite thin on the coarse side, or the medium grit side, which is the 1000 grit, and then we've got the 6000 grit this side. So I tend to keep them soaking in water. You can see that this one's a more sort of recent addition to the set, so obviously I've got a bit more thickness here. And I find that this combination of 1000 grit and 6000 grit is like the ultimate sort of sharpening stone for sharpening your kitchen knives, your bushcraft knives, your axes, draw knives, everything really. A nice addition if you're using it on a workbench is one of these non-slip holders. But quite often when I'm working in the workshop environment, as long as I'm using my stone like this, I will actually hold it in a vise. Now this vise has got some soft jaws on there. And this is an engineer's vise, but obviously you could use a woodworker's vise if you've got that. But the reason why I like to use this is it gives me a very comfortable stance. I can work at a very comfortable angle. I can see exactly what I'm doing, and it gives me a really nice position. So when you're sharpening secondary bevel knives, it really helps if you try and fix your hands and actually rock from your ankles. And this is what this vise sort of setup allows me to do. So I'm just going to make sure that this is held securely, like so. Obviously don't excessively tighten your vise because you don't want to actually crush the stone. And then if you want to, you could actually put a little bit of pen and colour in that bevel. So if you wanted to mark up that actual cutting edge to see where you're actually making contact with the stone, that's not a bad idea. But the main thing I want to do is make sure that I keep the surface of the stone wet. So I use Windex or Mr. Muscle or something like that, because these are stainless steel knives, but if you're using carbon steel, using something like Windex will mean that it's non-corrosive, and that's really important really. Now the other thing that I like to use when I am sharpening a knife with a flat grind or a secondary bevel is one of these little wooden chocks. Now these are included in our little sharpening sets, but you can make one of these yourself with a piece of scrap wood and a sort of high school protractor, so you can set the angle. Now this one's about 12 degrees, which is perfect for this kitchen knife, and what that allows me to do is I place that wedge onto the actual surface of the sharpening stone, and then I'm going to lay that flat side of the kitchen knife or flat grind knife that you're sharpening up against that wedge, and what that will do is it will give me that determined angle. So as I slice this now along the stone, and you can see using that sort of surface water as a bit of an indicator, I can see that I'm making absolute perfect contact with the stone. So come back to that wedge as a reference point, fix that angle, and like I say, you can lock your wrists to your body and then try and pivot from your ankles. Now ideally, the bigger the stone the possible when you're trying to do this single pass, maintaining that angle. But this kind of bench stone will give you pretty much enough reach on a 10-inch knife like this to get right through from the heel of the knife right through to the tip. Now obviously that is the one side, so I'm a right-handed person and I am sharpening this side of the knife. When it comes to sharpening the other side of the bevel, for all those ambidextrous people out there, they could literally just change hands and slice away again. But because I'm right hand dominant, what I'll do is I'll swap sides, I will move that wedge, wet the surface of the stone down again, and now what I can do is I can actually now draw that knife towards myself. Now you can see that I'm not applying a lot of pressure, I am just adding an even amount of pressure as I slice the knife all the way along the stone, just like so. So take your time, make sure that you maintain that angle, and slice. So we'll turn it round again and we'll do a few more passes this side. Now if you stop and sharpen your knife on a regular basis, you'll probably only need a few passes each side. The longer you leave your knife and the duller it gets, the coarser the stone you'll probably have to use, but also the more passes you're going to actually have to take on the stone. So I can pretty much see that I'm maintaining that whole angle, that consistent angle along that secondary bevel, and I'm going to check for a burr now. So I've probably done about maybe 30 passes on each side now, and then you want to carefully wipe away that sort of slurry, making sure that you wipe away from the cutting edge. And then I'm just going to have a little look, and I can see now that I've created a nice even polish all the way along that bevel. And if you've got good lighting in your workshop, or if you're doing it outside, you want to look down the edge and make sure that you've got rid of any light spots or any damage, if you've hit any hard bone or whatever when you're using it, any nicks and damage. That feels pretty good. And what you'll probably find is you will have created what we call a burr, which is like a hook of steel, basically where the edge gets to absolute as thin as possible, and it will fold over and create a little hook of steel on the opposite side to what you've just sharpened. So normally, if I've sharpened this side, the burr will be on this side of the blade, which I can feel ever so slightly really. You don't need to keep going excessively to create a massive burr, because the bigger the burr, the more work you've got to get to actually remove that. So like I say, that's quite a dull finish now. So that's 1000 grit. So what I'm going to do now is actually swap sides on that stone and repeat the process to get a more polished bevel on that knife. So this is 1000 grit, sometimes 6000 grit. So some people will use what they call a Naguru stone, which helps build up the slurry. But what I find with these particular brand of water stone is they're not excessively hard. So after a few passes actually sharpening, you'll start to actually break down the surface of the stone, and you'll see that you start to create this grey sort of slurry, which will help polish the actual bevel of the knife. So normally what I say to people with sharpening is, if it sounds nice, you're doing it correctly. If it sounds like sort of fingernails down a blackboard, it sounds wrong, you've got the angle slightly wrong. So using that little wedge, making sure you keep the surface of the stone wet, and trying to sort of slice the surface of the stone off with your knife like that. A few passes that side, make sure we keep that surface of the stone wet. Check that angle, and we'll try and make one even pass all the way along. So easing off the pressure now, and I'm trying to alternate sides, so that I'm trying to make that burr fold over from one side to the other. And what you'll find, that as you get more and more confident, and the more often that you sharpen, you'll probably be able to lose that little wedge. It's basically like having stabilizers on your bike when you're learning to ride a bike. After a while, with confidence and practice, your body will remember that angle. You could always just use it at the very initial start just to get that angle. Then you can remove it, and then it makes it much easier to alternate those strokes then once you get happy with that angle. So a few alternating strokes, and then we can clean off that slurry and we can check that edge. So now what we can see is a pretty even finish along the whole length of that bevel. And you might find that there's a slight burr hanging on, because I always find that when you come off a hard stone, you always are going to have a tendency to sort of leave a little bit of that burr hanging on. So I'll show you the quick, easy top tip to help remove that burr and give you that ultimate polished edge as well. So the next bit of kit that I use for sharpening, and to be quite honest, if you sort of catch that edge, if you feel that you're using any of your tools and they're just losing that bite, before you have to sort of resort to sharpening stones, you can quite often bring it back with your strop, and that's the bit that we're going to use for finishing our knives. So this is a paddle strop, so this has got the leather stuck to the board with the fluffy side of the leather uppermost, and then we charge that surface of the leather with some kind of polishing compound. So I really like Tormek paste. It seems to be a sort of medium grit, and it seems to just be perfect for removing that burr and leaving an ultimate sort of polished edge. So I normally put like a pea-size amount of Tormek paste onto the leather and just sort of rub it into the surface with my finger. You don't have to do it every time, because obviously it will hold that sort of compound on there. And then we use our kitchen knife again. If you really want to take it to extremes, you could check the angle with your little wedge, but quite frankly, it's not quite as critical. But the main thing is to try and hold it at that angle. But the big important factor is that you want to be drawing it away from the cutting edge. We're not pushing now, because if we push into that leather, you're going to be cutting into that gritty leather and you're actually going to be dulling the knife. So again, start off with reasonable pressure and then a few passes on each side, trying to go from the heel right through to the tip, and then you can sort of alternate a little bit. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to polish that burr back and forth until it just fatigues, and then it will just like literally snap off. Sometimes if you've been sharpening, you will create what we call a wire edge. That's where the burr actually comes off in a single hair, a sort of strand of metal that looks like a little silver hair of steel. That's the absolute ultimate. There you go, a few passes like so. Again, we want to clean off that slurry, don't want to leave that on the edge. So really carefully wipe off that slurry and clean that edge. And then we can have a little look. So again, it's refine that scratch pattern of the cutting edge itself. And then we can check for burr. So just wipe your fingers off the edge to feel for that hook of steel. And then we want to test for sharpness. So I normally come off the edge and just push against the dead layer of skin on my thumb, or I test it at a very acute angle on my thumbnail, and I can pretty much feel that it's biting in all the way along, so I know it's good and sharp really. So that's looking pretty good. So now what we can do is we want to test that edge. So normally what I say to people is definitely don't run your finger down it, but it'd be nice if you could feel along that whole cutting edge. So using a piece of paper and gently sliding it through the paper, we can feel that there's no burr, no catchiness. If at any one point it sort of stops and stalls and actually tears the paper, we normally know that that's where there's a bit of damage and we need to just go back, either give it another strop, or we can use the sharpening stones. But that's feeling pretty good, and that glides through the paper really nice and easily, and that's going to just be perfect for carving up some veggies. Fantastic. So we're pretty happy with that edge that we've got on there. Now obviously this is a stainless steel blade, but stainless is exactly what it means. It stains less than carbon steel. You still have to be a little bit careful of how you look after it. So what I always recommend is, if you've been using water for sharpening your tools, or you've been carving obviously wet vegetables, wash it up and then you can always use a little bit of oil to protect the surface of the steel. Now, you could use WD-40, but I wouldn't necessarily want to eat my dinner with a knife that I've got WD-40 on. So this is camellia oil. This is a nice food safe oil, and you can wipe that onto the surface of the blade. It will drive any moisture away, and it will put a little protective layer of oil on your knife, so when it's stored, you know that you're not going to get any corrosion forming, which is basically, rust is this sort of sharp edges sort of nightmare really. Any kind of rust along this lovely polished edge is going to take all our hard work away. So a little bit of protection with some camellia oil, and then that's ready to go. So I've sharpened the knife, Lois.
Thank you. So you reckon it's sharp enough to cut a cake?
I think it's pretty sharp. Yeah, it should cut it pretty good.
So we'll try it, shall we? We'd just like to say thank you to everyone who came to the Bushcraft show, who came to the stand, who came to say hello, who bought stuff from us, which we are very grateful for.
We are very much.
And we made a cake for all of you. So if you'd like to form an orderly queue, we'll give you a slice each.
Great. Let's see if it cuts it.
Ooh, it's not bad.
Like a laser.
Look at that, it's pretty good.
So
you want flowers in your bit?
I think we might need to cut it slightly smaller each piece to get
For everyone to get a piece. If there's not enough, I'll have to make another one, won't I? Here you go.
Fantastic.
There you go.
That's grand. Let's see what it's like. Not bad. Not bad at all.
Does it taste better because it's been sliced so cleanly?
I think it does. Well, thank you everybody. Thank you for tuning in. And hopefully we will see you for another Work in Progress Wednesday next week. I couldn't swallow the cake.
Well done to you too.
Well done.
You were great at the show.
Thank you. So was Lois.
Thank you. I'm going to have a bit now. Would you recommend barefoot sharpening?
Keeps you on your toes.